Testing, testing. I'm just testing audio. If I could just get you to confirm that you can see and hear correctly, I won't be a moment. Okay, without further ado, let's kick off for tonight. I really apologise about the start for this evening and the audio visual problems. I've got a checklist of things I work through for each webcast. It's all been the same tonight, so I'm really not sure where things went wrong. I'll have a bit of a dig into that and try and make sure it's resolved for the upcoming webcast. So look, let's just jump straight in. We're running a few minutes behind schedule, so I really do apologise. We'll still get through the content, and if you do have to leave us tonight due to time, etc., I'll post a recording up for those who have joined in tonight for you to catch up on things. So tonight we're going to have a really special deep dive into an area that I get a lot of questions over and over from you guys in and around Melbourne. What's happening in Melbourne? Are there any growth suburbs within Melbourne itself? You know, from within the CBD right out to the surrounding satellite suburbs. When I say that, I'm not including the Geelongs and Ballarats, Bendigos, etc. It has to be Melbourne. It has to be inner, middle or outer ring suburb where we're seeing some really nice growth and market health indicators in the Melbourne market. I will be referring back to the Pinpoint Predictions March edition report. So that's hot off the press today. We did have been frantically putting that together, and I will be revealing some insights based on the research that we have been doing in that report. So let's jump ahead and get right into the meat of this evening. Once again, I'm really sorry for all of you that have had the audio-visual problems. There's lots of you. So Seamus, Ian, Everett, Dom, Morgan, Maggie, Dom, Michelle, Patrick, Sumit, Bert, Saran, Lynn, Jarlath, Denny, how are you all? There's lots more. The list is going on and on. Lots of you have had problems back and forth, so I really do apologise about that. I'm just going to switch over and we'll jump into the first slide. Yeah, so where are we now? There will be a little bit of overlap. I'll try and skip through it really quickly for those of you that do join in regularly. I have been holding these market deep dive sessions every 2 weeks on Webcast, so there will be about 10 or 15 minutes of overlap tonight. I promise to get through that quickly for all of you guys who have been tuning in regularly. But we have seen some really interesting things emerging in our March edition of our Pinpoint Predictions report. This is building upon the research that we do here at Ripe House. We were featured back in September on the cover story of Money Magazine, and we've sort of really evolved the way that we report states, local government areas into suburbs, but then we don't leave you there. We don't leave you with asking questions. In our Pinpoint Predictions report, we do street level analysis, where the own occupiers, tenants live, houses, units, where are higher rents, higher yields achievable, where's public housing, etc. It's all detailed in our reports, and we have local government area infrastructure project research to really give you comfort in the whys. Why is this LGA going forward? Which suburbs are leading the LGA in terms of the growth indicators? Which streets and properties to target for that growth? So that's all in that report. I will be referring to that tonight as March observation. So, and this is sort of coming back in terms of talking to the report to you guys and investors who come through Ripe House and reach out to us in customer support or me personally, etc. A lot of you are asking, is there any Melbourne suburbs featured in the report? And in February, we had no Melbourne suburbs, but this month is slightly different. We've actually got three Melbourne suburbs featured, and once again, as was the case in February, Geelong itself is featured, which is 70 k's or so from Melbourne CBD, and very heavily featured in terms of its growth potential and upside in the next couple of years. So we're seeing some great things in the Melbourne market health and potential upside. But tonight we will focus on the Melbourne market that has just emerged. It's been simmering there, very close to being included over the last few months, and it's just pushed through with some nice health indicators in the market. So we'll be featuring that tonight. I will actually be also going into the Geelong market firstly, just to put things in context, because I have talked to a very experienced Ripe House investor yesterday. He's still on a buying research trip, or to research trip at this stage, on the back of our February edition of the report. He's down there for 3 days, driving every street and really getting to talk to a lot of the local area experts, agents, buyers agents, planners, etc., valuers in Geelong. So I've got some really good information about what's happening down there that we might like to share beforehand, and Geelong is featured in our March edition as well. So these suburbs are primed to position for growth in the next 1 to 3 years. We will classify them as growth suburbs, and we will tonight also be pinpointing the exact streets and properties to target in those suburbs when we find them. And I can demonstrate that using the software. We can actually get out of tonight some individual properties that are potentially stacking up really well. So I did this process in a one-on-one coaching session today with a investor who's looking in Queensland. She was originally potentially staying away from Queensland, and we worked through a few different areas, and we came out of the session with some really nice candidate properties to target. And I can sort of demonstrate that process because it's a good case study where we're not left wondering how we're going to buy in these suburbs that have been recommended to us, but we are really helping each other and actually being able to facilitate that search and find the property. So that's going to be all included in tonight. So definitely stick around outside of the technical issues. A little bit about me very quickly. Been investing for about 15 years. I would kind of classify myself as a DIY property investor. I really like talking with other investors, empowering myself with knowledge and understanding and improving my journey. Flip-flop myself, real priority on capital growth at the expense of yields, and now it's more so yields. But I like to research and look across the country, and when you do that, you've got the potentially a higher chance to have great capital growth in the short to medium term, in addition to excellent rental yields, if you can find these growth markets successfully. Founded Ripe House in 2011. We're based down here in Tassie, in Hobart. We shifted back from Sydney a bit over 2 years ago, and now based down here in Hobart. So big shout out to any of you who are in Hobart. I usually do a bit of a poll to ask where you are located. Yeah, due to technical issues, we'll skip on from that. But it'd be great to hear from any other Tassie people, or if you'd like to mention where you are, pop it into chat, and I'll try and see if I can have some shout outs for some interesting places. If there are any audio and visual problems, I've just seen Tim mention there is an audio issue for him that's intermittent cutout. It's potentially to do with your internet connection at your end, so potentially close any videos that you're streaming or other things that might be draining your internet connection. Otherwise, potentially refresh your browser window or hit the reconnect button at the bottom of your browser. If that's still not working, lower the resolution of your browser window, so just reduce the window size. If there's still widespread issues with audio cutting out, if I see a few of you with the same issue, I'll look to my end and try and reduce the resolution of the broadcast, which might clear up things, but that's a last case scenario. So let's move ahead. A little bit of housekeeping there. There will be a recording at the end that can be provided, and a Q&A session as well that we can jump into and save up all your questions, get them coming through. Let's have a really nice one-on-one conversation, well, multiple ones-on-one at once together in the Q&A session to finish. Just a little bit of our track record. We released a report. It's buried in our blog, ripehouse.com.au/blog. going back to December 2014, predicting our top 10 suburbs for 2015. Now, you could have potentially gone through and selected multiple Sydney suburbs and had great growth in 2015. That's all well and good, but you've got to hold that property now through a downtrending or slowdown phase of the property cycle. So we tend to look for growth markets that are in that, really ramping up their growth phase. So at the start of that cycle, typically 1 to 3 years of excellent growth, hopefully, and more likely to be that 3 years of excellent growth, and then fall back in line with the property clock and not potentially be in the doldrums for an extended period of time. So that's what we're looking for with a growth market. And if we look across the whole country, we can tend to find those at any one time. A couple of the really nice wins that we had in this broadcast back just over a year ago, 9 out of 10 suburbs had positive growth. We had 16.4% gain in a non-Brisbane Queensland suburb. It was in Noosa Heads, in the top of the Sunshine Coast there. We had a 17.9% gain not in a Sydney suburb in New South Wales, which is Katoomba, and we had 12.7% in an ACT suburb, which was on nobody's radar. We saw some great market dynamics there. It was in Gundalin. Forgive my pronunciation there. I describe that as a true diamond in the rough, where you can look for these excellent market dynamics and generate that type of growth if you're able to do the research and use the tools to help you to do that. So that's what it's all about. Once again, just a little bit of information. The Ripe House Pinpoint Predictions Report. This is our flagship research piece. This month's edition was released today. It features 126 pages of digestible property information. So we start off with a state-by-state analysis. We look into individual LGAs of interest, suburbs, streets, and properties. We've nominated 13 council areas across the country which are looking to perform very positively. And within those 13 council areas, 20 individual suburbs have been nominated. And we take a deep dive on each of those suburbs. We categorise the report into a number of core strategies. So we'll come back to this throughout this evening. Here at Ripe House, we define suburbs as either big green suburbs, which means they've got a lot of or very positive market health. The buy indicators are there for growth. You've got great investability. It means you can buy properties or there's multiple properties for sale in the key streets that we identify and they're most in demand. Great yields. And you've also got really positive market sentiment from researchers, experts, valuers, real estate institute members, and local area experts, as well as lots of investor interest. So big greens are the really great growth markets with potentially a bit of heat in them now. You can move back from there and look for boomerang markets, which have great market health, great sentiment, but there's no investor interest. So you can potentially target boomerang suburbs to beat the curve. And that's a Geelong market, which we can go into in a moment. And then you've got undercover suburbs. So just phenomenal market health, but no sentiment, no opinion, no experts tracking them. It's not in the media yet, no other investor interest, but the numbers look great. And if that fits your risk profile, then you associate yourself with an undercover strategy, they are covered in this report as well. So it's an end-to-end research piece. That's for more information, you can jump over to www.ripehouse.com.au/pinpoint predictions, which has just been released today. Okay, what we're defining here, so when I'm talking about a big green, at an LGA level, we have some phenomenal drivers for this growth above and beyond a typical market. So even when we're looking at somewhere like Brisbane, Brisbane would be defined as a capital city with some great growth drivers, a lot of eyes on it, a lot of tips there for growth in 2016 and beyond. When we're looking for a growth market, it's above and beyond this typical market. A typical market at any one point has infrastructure spending to whatever degree, but a growth market has phenomenal above and beyond infrastructure, population, employment, income upside. So when we're looking at these type of markets, and our big green markets have our master plan potentially attached to it. They have a very well orchestrated plan across government, commercial, the large names, the Westfields, the IKEAs, etc. Looking at developing there. You have train extensions, you have highway extensions, etc. You have all of these things joining together to really facilitate population growth and then the cultural benefits associated with a population growth and an independent hub separate to a capital city. So when we're defining these growth markets, we're looking for the green area there on the growth curve. So that's when you're trying to make your money in the short term above and beyond the normal market. That's not going to last forever. Price, all of the wonderful population growth, income growth, employment growth is eventually going to fall back to the average of a typical market, and that's going to be all priced in to the asking or sale price in that LGA at some point in the future. We're looking at 1 to 3 years of above average growth and then potentially falling back in line with the normal property cycle. But we're making our money in that green patch here. And that's what we're referring to in a growth market. So anytime you see a boomerang or a big green, etc., they're at the first stages of this growth market cycle, and we are forecasting a nice overlap or above and beyond profit over the typical market when we refer to these growth areas. When we look at things at Ripehouse, which we call the Ripehouse Property Insights Platform, we, I suppose, describe it as a holistic approach to investment. We provide tools when we encourage investors to start with the state. Where is the state on the property clock? It's really important to not fall in love with what you're seeing there at a state level. If you're seeing that New South Wales has passed the market peak, it's in the slowdown phase in mass media, that is too general. You need to take a deeper dive from the state into the council level. So this is presented visually. The top areas start with the state, but don't fall in love with what you're seeing. You can still take a deeper dive in New South Wales, for example, and find individual LGAs outside of Sydney that are really in their growth or heading into boom-like conditions, even outside of Sydney, where typically the Sydney market has hit its peak in a slowdown phase. And even then, you can still see within Sydney growth markets that are still in the nice growth part of the phase, even whilst the other suburbs or LGAs around it are definitely in the slowdown or trough phases. You've had a bit of a look at the state level information. Take a deeper dive into LGAs. We do health checks on LGAs. Where are the LGAs on the property clock? And is there positive sentiment and opinion around that LGA in the media and by other experts in the market? We also then take a dive into suburbs. Which suburbs, like for like, in that LGA are primed to deliver growth in line with our strategy, but then also relative to each other. When we find those suburbs, let's find the perfect street to have the most growth that we can potentially achieve from that suburb. So individual streets don't go up in value consistently across the suburb. We've got to try and find the streets in that suburb that are potentially going to lead growth forward and not be investing in streets that are potentially going to be held back by localized issues and really underperform in terms of what our potential in that suburb could be. So perfect street into the perfect property. Is that property well suited to the demand in that street, into the suburb and into the council area? Are the population, employment, income drivers going to hit the mark with the type of property that you are potentially purchasing? Is it a property that's going to be in demand for tenants, but then also positioned potentially around other owner-occupiers who will improve their property and maintain your street appeal for your property, even with a tenant in it? So there's a few considerations to make. Let's take a bit of a dive into some practical examples tonight and show how this process is interrelated, but you need to be having that context all the way through each of those stages. I suppose the traditional investment search versus Ripehouse, we tend to think we're trying to help people see a future way of investing, how things can potentially be done in the future. Typically, you might have been looking in real estate classifieds or papers, etc., looking at individual property and then potentially doing an appraisal on it, but you've got no context around that property. Is it going to perform against your strategy? Is it going to perform against the suburb that it's housed in? And is that suburb then suited to you personally? Ripehouse potentially helps you to time the market, define the market cycle, and then get in at the right time. And then if you're, I suppose, describing it as a buy, hold, or sell recommendation on a suburb, is it time to buy? Is it time to hold? Is it a time to sell? Ripehouse helps you to avoid public housing and other potentially negative aspects at a street level. We don't think all streets are created equal. There's definitely streets, and think into your local suburb that you'll seek out and those that you want to avoid. We help you try and dissect suburbs you would never visit or you never have to potentially invest in them, and find those dead spots, those poor locations where there's too far to local amenities, etc. We tell you and teach you to match the property to the suburb and then to your strategy and access the nation to get above average returns compared to what you could potentially access around the corner or in your local area. So accessing the nation for potentially that magic combination of above average capital growth in a growth market and excellent yields with lots of tenant demand. So that's what we're looking for, and that's the way we try and do things here at Webcast. So what am I talking about at this street level? We've done some research here last year, and we look for a combination of things at a street level. We have an amazing data warehouse here at Webcast, and we know the percentages of a number of things at a street level. So public housing, we can tell you the density of public housing in a particular street right across the country, level of owner-occupiers versus tenants, level of houses versus units, yield, sold price, rental price, income, etc. And we've looked for the combination of those things in addition to distance to key amenities to try and find areas in suburbs that outperform the remainder of the suburbs. And we define those as the Webcast sweet spot. And I'll go into a little bit more information into that in a moment. But the Webcast sweet spot, as we define it, generally, by average, over the 3 months through to September, and this has been proven since that period as well, to outperform the remainder of each suburb by 21.9% in relative terms. So a Webcast sweet spot's generally around 10 to 15% of each suburb. If you invest in those streets, you can generally expect to outperform the remainder of that suburb by 21.9%. And over 10 years, in Sydney as an example, starting today, that equates to over $240,000 in extra profit just by selecting the key streets and investing in those streets, as opposed to the remainder of each suburb. So it's really critically important to get the street level right. Just a little bit of insight into the amenities that we've looked. So we've done a lot of research. You can see for each property how far the closest transport, shopping and school is, and how, perhaps more importantly, that location affects appraisals and demand and value for each property. What it's saying here, these three little graphs, is around a kilometre, 1,100 metres is a sweet spot for transport where you have the highest positive effect on appraised values. 250 metres away from schools, and anywhere under around 1,200 metres to local shopping is the sweet spots for amenities. We did this research for a lot of other things as well, including things like cafes, restaurants, parks, hospitals, etc. These were definitely far and away the big three. Another thing to look out for is public housing. So that graph there is mapping the concentration of public housing versus property value. Expect to pay 25% more than average to be in a street with 0% public housing in our major capitals. And at 18% or more public housing in the street, expect to pay 20% less than the suburb average. So public housing has a dramatic effect on appraisals, demand and values, and it potentially adds a lot of volatility to your tenancies. Lowers street appeal, you might have vacancy issues, etc. in these streets. So it's definitely critical to know this type of information. So what do we define as a Webcast sweet spot? I'll be getting into some practical examples and looking for this Melbourne market in a moment, but this needs to be clarified. The Webcast sweet spot is a combination of 5 things at a street level: low public housing, in-demand property in that street, lots of in-demand property in that street, higher than average rent, high tenant demand, and higher than average yields. The high rent and high yields together on a street level is is a really nice mix. It's a very powerful mix. It doesn't happen very often, but when you find it, it's demonstrating to you that this area is in demand by people moving into the area. People are paying above average rents to live there, and that hasn't been priced into above average house prices or property prices. Prices haven't moved yet, but rents are really starting to shift, and that groundswell of demand is creating that rental increases, and that's why yields are still high. So that's the time to buy. When you're looking at a growth market, you've got lots of new people potentially coming into the area. You want to focus on the streets that they're most likely to buy or want to rent into. That demand and that groundswell of new demand is going to create the upwards pressure on price. And this is a nice combination of 5 factors that you can look for to give yourself the best chance of pinpointing those streets with that demand, and not just throwing your data at the board and hoping for the best. So this is the science behind what we're doing here. Let's just do a quick wrap up, and then we'll launch into some investigation on the ground. So I'm just going to go through in a moment the state of the states, a quick wrap up. LGA versus LGA. How can we find LGAs within states? We'll explore the nation. I'll pick out the big green that I'm going to talk about first, which is in Geelong, and then which is the Melbourne satellite that we're looking at now, and then the Big Bang Melbourne suburb in focus to come shortly after. So one moment, I'm just going to hit the mute button to change slides, and I won't be a second. Okay, my apologies there. It's actually logged me out. It has a 30-minute timeout on the site while we're getting ready with the technical delays, etc. This evening. I just had to log back in there. You should be seeing in front of you the Ripe House tour page with the big black Ripe House Property Insights platform message in front of you. So this is a page, it's your launching pad, ripehouse.com.au/tour, to really navigate through the site and do your due diligence and research. What we do is, starting here, it is visually designed to take you through that journey, but let's start at the top here and have a quick look at the states of the state. So the key thing to look at and to see at Ripe House is we don't like dealing with last year's information. So a lot of the research and advice that you see in the market at the moment is based on last quarter of 2015 information. We own data exclusively. We moderate our data warehouse to provide live data. So the property clock information you're seeing here is as of today, the state growth levels as of today, as well as the key property data at a state level as of today. So when you see this heartbeat, that means the data is live. What we're seeing here, interestingly enough, Tasmania's firmly at 9 o'clock, which is right in the buy part of the cycle there, recovery into growth. Queensland and New South Wales are still in the buy part of the cycle as a state at 10 o'clock. Now that might jump out at you as a bit of a surprise. You know, Sydney is very, they're very widely reported as in the slowdown. Definitely the market peak has been and gone. Now when you sort of talk generally, you can make statements like that, and it really doesn't count for anything. We can see New South Wales is still as a state at 10 o'clock on the property clock. And we can even click on the state there and now look at individual LGAs within the state to see the full picture. So obviously when you see a state level remark, it's a generalization, it's an average of all the LGAs in the state. And certainly here I've just filtered all LGAs by the property clock time for that LGA, and areas like Hunters Hills at 2 o'clock, Auburn, North Sydney, Canada Bay, Strathfield, Botany Bay, Waverley, Ryde, Randwick, Sydney itself, Willoughby, Lane Cove, Pittwater, Wallara. They're all in the early stages of the property clock. So you can see a lot of the middle to upper market of Sydney is firmly still in the, or is definitely in the low market health phase, and the property clock in the slowdown and trough phases. You can see some numbers, some names, some other Sydney suburbs potentially still in the buy areas in the recovery phases. At any one time you can still find them. But our area of focus tonight is on Queensland. That was just a great example to show even with New South Wales, you can still find some LGAs that are looking to perform at any one time. Victoria, though, is a far more consistent story, as is Queensland. You've got a far higher percentage of LGAs in the prime buying part of the cycle. What I tend to do, so I've come into Victoria, We've got some amazing numbers that we can work with to find LGAs of interest. I like to firstly filter LGAs between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock on the cycle. So they're far enough around past 6 o'clock to be sure that they are in the growth phase and they're not having a little bit of what are we going to be doing now type conversation with themselves. You sometimes see that where the market health has been bad or downtrodden for a certain period of time. It's starting to recover. It might have a few false starts. So when you see it starting to get around to 8 o'clock, you're getting some really nice momentum building, and that's potentially the time to buy. Through to 10 o'clock is still the buying time. After 10 o'clock, you might not have enough upside before the market peak to justify that purchase at the expense of buying in another market with more upside to its market peak. So 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock is my sweet spot there. We've also got a number of LGA level health checks that we perform. Is sales volumes at a high point in the cycle? Is it trending upwards? Is days on market healthy? And is it at a low point in the cycle to show that health? Are yields high and are they trending upwards? Very important to get that health right. We like to see at least 4 out of 6 health ticks. And you can see very quickly we're getting to a very short list of LGAs across the state. I also like just to max things out at 120 days on market as an LGA. We don't want to be investing in a healthy rural market that has very high days on market, potentially stopping us from getting out. We have some really, we track, as I mentioned, sentiment and opinion from experts in the market, local markets, right through to Real Estate Institute members, valuers, and agents on the ground. We interview those on a regular basis, consistently moderating those conversations so we can form opinion for each LGA and suburb across the country, like for like. So we're moderating those conversations to make sure when you see a high opinion score in Victoria, that it's high compared to other states across the country. So we can then order these LGAs, the top 5 based on their opinion score. Ballarat is one here that's doing very nicely, but I'm focusing now on Geelong. We've had good recent growth here. We've got a nice sample size of dwellings in the LGA. It's at 10 o'clock on the property clock and very high opinion and sentiment score. Now, it's one thing to find these LGAs. It's another thing to then take a deep dive in. So I've clicked on that now. This is going to go across and find all suburbs in that LGA. That's local government area, council area. It's going to display them here visually. Now, this is a new page here at Webcast, and it's trying to help you understand and comparing suburbs based on their investment potential. I'm just scrolling through every suburb in Geelong LGA, and you can see a lot of the suburbs are red in colour or orangey red. So green is go, green is good. We go through to orange, which is a potential hold or watch, or right through to red and dark reds, which is a definite no-go zone, very poor market health and opinion and interest and investability. We like to see green, and big greens are excellent. So we characterise the strategy by its shape. Number 1 here is Belmont, which is featured in our report in some incredible detail. Boomerang, Belmont is a boomerang, and you can tell by its shape here, if you use your imagination, that it is looking a little bit like a boomerang shape, where Hamlin Heights is a typical big green. So Belmont has phenomenal market metric health. So 6 ticks out of 6. You've got really nice, healthy sales volume trending upwards to a high point in the cycle. Really nice, healthy, high yields trending upwards to that point in the cycle. You've got accessible days on market at a low point in its cycle. Excellent market health. You've got excellent investability. So lots of properties on the market in the key Webcast sweet spot areas, and they're the most in-demand property types. So you've got a number of properties to potentially choose from and buy, and you've got great incomes there in a boomerang. So opinion is potentially starting to trend upwards, as we've seen within this LGA, but no other investors have caught on yet. So when investors start taking notice, that suburb then becomes a big green, all other things maintained as equal. So this is a phenomenal page. You can navigate all suburbs within an LGA. You can come in and by default, if I refresh the page, it will do a random sample to pick across the country to just give you a bit of a snapshot of some different types of suburbs and how that you would expect them to look. Or you can actually click on the strategy over here on the left-hand side, and it will dig across the whole country and find the the standout markets for that strategy. And you can see Belmont here is number 2 for a boomerang growth market across the whole country. We've also got Hamlin Heights potentially to look at, and a couple of others in Geelong that are worth a look. But Belmont can be our first one to take a dive into as a Melbourne satellite suburb of interest. So we can see some really quick look information here. 73 properties on the market, 3-bedroom houses are most common. You can actually click on this pop-up here and see all of the on-market activity. So this property's been on the market as an example for 92 days, 155,000 asking, and you can see it's been discounted by 12% in those 92 days. So you can get some really good insights into what's happening. We track all on-market for sale listings, for rent listings and sold listings across the country. We bring them together like a search engine like Google, and we display them in one place for you. That operates within 24 hours, but it's usually a lot less of what is happening in reality. If you actually nominate and track a suburb, it's actually within half an hour we can send you an email or SMS to tell you that a property of interest has been discounted, sold, or one has arrived in your sweet spots of interest for sale. So incredible insight into the market. It's not just based on very generic or basic filters to give you an email notification. It's very rich in terms of its investor knowledge to provide you a recommendation for a property in terms of parts of our platform. So there's lots of ways to get familiar with the suburb. There's plenty of buttons and ways you can spend half an hour on this page to really immerse yourself in the suburb. Any of these toggles on the right-hand side, you can click and apply to the map, and it will quickly show you the suburb and the surrounding suburbs, the heat for a particular metric at a suburb level. So this one, the darker the red, the higher the yield. So you can see that Belmont is very high yielding, and it's surrounded by other lower yielding areas. You can see value, sold price for the suburb. So you can see that Belmont's slightly less in terms of purchase price than it surrounds. Newtown, as an example, is the premium suburb in Geelong, and out further from the CBD, prices are getting lower. So this is a really nice snapshot for suburb level information, but this is an amazing piece of functionality here at Ripehouse is the street level information. So on the left-hand side, these toggles relate to street level. Each of these areas is approximately 200 dwellings, and in this case, the darker the red, the higher the public housing concentration in the street. This particular street has 12.4% public housing. The average in the suburb is 3%, and the average in the state is 2.8%. So quite high public housing in that street area. And if you can remember, that was one of the factors that we looked for in determining the Ripehouse sweet spot. We can look for occupancy type. So green here is owner occupiers, yellow is renters. Property type, so yellow here is more higher concentrations of units. Green is higher concentrations of houses. You can see where the higher rents are in the suburb, where the higher yields are. This is interesting. So 5.8% is the highest, is the average yield in the suburb, but you can actually target some of these really high yielding street areas in the south of Belmont for potentially up to 8% yields is the average in these street areas. So yield is something that changes per street across a suburb, and you might typically rule a suburb off because its average yield is not high enough for your strategy, but then you're missing out on opportunity in these suburbs. And you can see a very strong bias towards higher yields over here in the west and lower yields up here towards the more expensive neighbouring suburbs, etc. It's nice to find these relationships. Bringing all this together and making it really easy for you. We've got the Ripehouse Sweet Spots overlay. We've done all of the hard work for you. Come in here and click on the capital gains override. It adjusts all of these toggles for the metrics that we're looking for in the suburb: public housing, occupancy, property type, rent, income, yield. It sets them all at the recommended levels for the default Ripehouse Sweet Spot strategy. And then you can apply that, and you can see exactly the areas in the suburb to target. You can then filter properties based on their physical location, making sure they are physically located in these sweet spot areas. This will take a few seconds to apply, so just bear with me a moment. And then we can do full market appraisals, full comparable analysis. I won't do that as an example here. I'll do that within our feature suburb for tonight. So we can do that market analysis there for you. But then we can see those the full deep dive. So Andrea has just mentioned that it might be a little bit fuzzy video-wise in terms of the quality of the broadcast. If that's the case, potentially just refresh your browser window or reduce the resolution on your window, the size of the browser window. That might refresh things. It's looking really clear on our test machine here, which we've got set at about 1,000 pixels wide, slightly higher by the looks of it. Really nice and clear there. Otherwise, the recording will come through on YouTube, and that will generally have very high resolution. So you can see here it's found 4 properties that tick all of the boxes. This property, as an example, is a unit, 155K, or it's a vacant block of land. And you can see it has been discounted 10% since December. Sorry, 6% since September, $10,000. So you can see how it's an end-to-end solution. We've gone from the state into the LGA, found the absolute stellar suburbs in that LGA, into the street and into the property using all of the tools within Ripehouse. I hope I've sort of given a bit of an intro into some of the key themes that we can see and how we should be performing our due diligence using tools like Ripehouse, but also outside of that, just generally in investing for the future. I'm just going to switch back over to the slides now. I won't be a moment. Okay, so Ripehouse, as you've seen, is a research platform, a holistic research platform, and it's used by a lot of others in the industry. So amongst our users and subscribers, we have researchers, educators, buyers, agents, and investors, a large number of investors, and it's always growing using our platform. And this is something, this is a little bit that they've had to say about how they use our software for their purposes and what they do. Some great feedback. We love to hear feedback from all you guys using the software at any time. We're always looking to improve and develop the functionality and features. So if you have any feedback at all, let us know. We haven't finished, so do stick around. We're still going through our core Melbourne suburbs, so definitely stick around for that in a moment. That's what you've all been waiting for. I just wanted to mention something really quickly in terms of Ripehouse as a subscription service. So Ripehouse is an annual subscription. We provide annual subscriptions to access everything that you've seen tonight, the full research platform, property insights platform. And as a big thank you, there is more to come, but just getting in, just to say thank you for joining us in this event. I'd love to extend to you a $200 discount off that normal annual subscription of $797. So that brings it down to $597 as a thank you, which does expire at 11 p.m. tonight. As part of the big thank you, I'd also like to extend, I am referring very heavily to the Pinpoint Predictions Report, the March edition, which was released today. I'd love to include a free copy of that valued at $97. If you do take up the thank you offer tonight, you can jump onto Ripehouse, www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus. All you need to do there is click on the Get Started button. That will then pre-fill a coupon code, which will activate that $200 discount for you. Just fill in your basic details and you'll be able to get started on making payment via our secure Stripe processor. That will lock in this special $200 discount, the free copy of the Pinpoint Predictions Report at $97. There is a Join Us button on the right-hand side of your screen at the moment, which actually will help you to lock that in right now. And as a very special offer, I'd like to extend my hand in one-on-one investment coaching with you directly. So this is going to be standing by your side. We can jump onto Skype, mobile, email, etc., but we'll work on Skype primarily because it's visual and it works really well. I'll stand and work with you very closely, looking at what you're trying to achieve for your next property purchase. We can jump into the Ripehouse research platform, refer back to the property report, some areas that you're looking at buying in. Big shout out to Natalia, who I sat with today. Peter, who I also sat with this afternoon, were two that I'd spoken to for the first time today, looking in new areas. Natalia looking potentially through into the Moreton Bay area in Brisbane. We worked through and we actually found some properties of interest. Natalia, we found one property that looked an outstanding proposition. Natalia called and it literally had an offer accepted today. A lot of eyeballs on that property. It was really stacking up nicely. And then we found a secondary property that was very closely aligned. We dug a little bit deeper and found a second property within the space of a couple of hours that was also an outstanding proposition just around the corner. And that one is now not on the market and potentially moving forward on. So that's all part of the one-on-one investment coaching. I'll be standing by your side all the way through in terms of finding the property, using the platform, researching the areas that are going to be suited to you, and then potentially providing just an opinion and the sounding board around negotiation and offer making, etc. for that property. You can lock that in as well as part of this special offer, access to our Ripe House Club access. That's a special priority access to private webcast events and research that we do release, market commentary, etc. We had an event last Thursday night with a very special guest who is a very high volume Ripe House investor user. He's got a $47 million portfolio, an absolute outstanding property expert. He was very generous in coming on last Thursday night, helping our Ripe House users who have taken up this offer in the past to invest in one of our key growth markets across the country. That type of information and access is only available through this bonus offer as part of the Ripe House Club. So that's there. Let's skip forward and now get to the meat of tonight, which is a deep dive into a Melbourne growth market. So we'll look at which street, which properties, and potentially how to negotiate there. I'll just now switch back again. I bear with me for a few moments while I do just switch back over to the tool. Okay, we're finished with Belmont. Jump onto me via chat or in the question and answer. There are a few other nice, strong candidates within Geelong itself. If you can think back to another LGA that we found in Victoria, is the city of Frankston in Melbourne itself. If we click on the city of Frankston, we've got some really nice key markets there. So Frankston itself is actually a big green, and this is our Melbourne growth market that we'll be discussing tonight. Frankston is included in great detail in the March edition of the Pinpoint Predictions Report. It is a Melbourne market in the southeast corner of Melbourne, facing Port Phillip. It has been on people's radar going back and forth for as long as I've been investing. Always had really good yields, low purchase price. And sometimes you see this, quite regularly you see this, when a core market like Melbourne has had great growth, it's then the satellite areas around it at the lower price points that get the second wave of growth. That seems to be happening in Frankston. We've got some really interesting gentrification drivers in Frankston at the moment. You have good market health, good to high investor interest, very high opinion and sentiment in the market, good investability and good yields. We're seeing 4 out of 6 market ticks for Frankston. We can actually go to the research page here. So this is handing you the keys and looking under the hood of all of our data here at Ripe House. It's very intricate with this page, and for all the engineer types in the audience, they'll get a real kick out of looking at this type of data. But what it's showing you here is the actual incidents. You can see things like sales volume. This is trending sales volume by quarter, and you can see it started at a low point here 5 or 6 quarters ago, and it's trended upwards nicely, steadied out to a high point in the cycle here, the red line in recent times. You can see that yield is at a reasonably high point in the cycle, but it's just come off the peak in the last quarter. You can see days on market, stable, slightly trending downwards, but it's at that nice accessible 70 or 78-ish days, which is good market health. You can see things like sales volumes. Are they at a high point in the cycle? This is demonstrating a yearly rolling sales volume metric, which shows it is trending upwards very consistently. You can even see it at a 90-day rolling, see if it's above the longer term trend or not. A huge amount of power and insight on this page, which is available to annual subscribers. You can do this for per suburb or via house, units, or all. Some suburbs with lots of properties, etc., do take a few seconds to load on this page. So do bear with it when it does load. So let's take a deep dive into Frankston. We'll go back here. We'll do the deep dive analysis, which is the street level stuff, and we'll try and dissect and work out how to potentially invest in Frankston for us looking there now. So one moment while this loads. Okay, 3-bedroom houses, most in common. Frankston's a funny one because you seem to have a large build-up of units along the water's edge. It's a very broad suburb. You've got 188 properties currently on the market. I think you've got, what would it be? I'm just trying to do a mental calculation of how many dwellings. So I think it's about 16,000 dwellings. There's 88 areas with 200 dwellings in each. So yeah, around 16,000, 17,000 dwellings. It's a vast suburb, very large in terms of, or with relative terms across the country. So at any one time, you've got many markets within Frankston. You've got lots of properties on the market. How do we find the areas that are most suited to growth and to ourselves? So one way we can start is by looking where tenants choose to live, or where owner-occupiers choose to live. And we're seeing a really strong pattern with high tenant demand in the bright yellow here towards the Frankston shopping district, the train line, and also the water. And then that moves into owner-occupier, middle market, suburbia, just inland. Very strong bias towards this area for tenants, and green in the inland areas. Now we can see property type. Where are units or houses located? We can see a very strong correlation between units and tenants and houses and owner-occupiers. There's only 20% units, so don't get thrown off the scent. Where there are units, they are tended to be tenanted, but there's a vast volume and majority of houses being tenanted. 80% of properties are houses in the suburb. And what we're trying to do is making sure we're focusing on those 80% of houses, but finding the street areas that have good tenant demand outside of those units. So we're trying to remember where the green was on potentially both of these colorings. So you don't need to potentially take down notes, excuse me, on each of these street level areas. That's what the Ripe House sweet spot toggle is for, but it's interesting just doing a little bit of analysis. You can see here very above average rents along the water's edge, but also above average rents down here in the owner-occupier clusters, and where are the higher yields. So also, interestingly enough, nice high yields down here in the owner-occupier clusters, and then along the water's edge as well. So you can see a very broad suburb. You can invest here in many different ways, but the most recommended sweet spot areas, lots of house demand, lots of tenant demand, high rent, high yield, and low public housing. There is some public housing issues in Frankston. It's a low socioeconomic area. Only 4% public housing, interestingly enough, which is quite low for low socioeconomic areas. But this street area here has over 20% public housing down here near the hospital. That's a no-go zone in terms of prohibitive levels of public housing. We can do our street level analysis here. By default, it will recommend 4 street level areas. We can see them positioned on the map. With 88, we keep fine-tuning our sweet spots down to the top 4 in these types of suburbs. We might like to open that out a little bit and have a play and open that out to 10% of the suburbs. So we're focusing on potentially 8 or 9 street level areas in our search, reducing our potential rent from a very high level, which we'll fine-tuned just to get a little bit of a few options in the suburb. I can take you through the logic and complexities around that in our one-on-ones. but we've seen that there are a number of properties on the market in these street level areas, and a lot obviously outside of them. So what we can do, this will take a few seconds to apply this with me being on the call and also using the internet connection. We can search only for properties that are houses that are 3 or 4 bedroom, so that are the most in-demand property type in the suburb. That was the text that was displayed at the start of the suburb load, that are physically located in the custom strategy areas. So we can apply that filter, and that will go away, and it will look at individual properties and place them in those street level areas. While that's occurring, it will take a few seconds. But a lot of investor eyeballs already on Frankston. It's got some heat in the market there already. A bit of bonus points is potentially looking at Frankston South. Frankston South is a boomerang. It doesn't quite have the investor interest yet, but it's very similar in terms of market health and expert sentiment and opinion. So bonus points, look to Frankston South for very similar reasons. You've got some sweet spot areas in Frankston South which do border Frankston itself, so very, very similar buying conditions, and that's a little bit of a bonus point. We've got 8 properties that have been returned to us now, physically located in these street areas. I'll probably ignore this aberration up here as an area here on the water, and I'd like to focus around this middle market Frankston, which are 5 street areas very close to each other with very similar positive growth indications. We can order this list of 8 properties in any number of ways: price, discount amount, or days on market. This one here is my eyes dragged towards it because of the discount amount of 4%. Let's take a bit of a look at it. Really nicely renovated, 3-bed, 2-bath, 2 cars, 595 square meters, been on the market for 43 days. Our algorithm has automatically assessed this as in good condition. I agree with that. You can override it if you disagree. That's going to go away and find comparables that are more likely to be in a similar condition and help you with a more valid comparable analysis. We can see it's been reduced $20,000 since January of this year. So it has had that 4% discounting applied by the agent and vendor. We can see street level information, 2% uptrending growth in the last quarter, sorry, 1%. A little bit of a hit in terms of rent per week in the last quarter. That's potentially seasonal, coming off Christmas. Yields are slightly down as a result of that. We can see street level information. It's going to go away and it's going to find us the most likely 5 valid comparables for this property. It's going to order them, but I do encourage you to check out the images, making sure that the property and the block size is consistent with what we're looking at. This one potentially is slightly larger block. It's just over the magic 700 number, so I'll take that out. It's going to give us a list of 5 comparables which are within 50K here. I definitely recommend curating these comparables and owning that process. It's going to go away now and average those comparables and give us a little bit of insight into how the street level location is potentially going to adjust that comparable number. So it's starting off at 420 as our baseline comparable that we've just established. It's had a negative adjustment because we're a little bit too far away from the closest schools or shopping, and we do have a little bit of public housing in the street level area, so we have a slight negative adjustment there. So based on all of this, our final appraisal is 390, asking price 399, estimated appraised rent is 340 with a yield of 4.5. If you've got any doubts about that, you can click on the Ask Ripehouse button there, and you can this will automatically generate a Twitter hashtag Ask Ripehouse, tweet to us at Ripehouse. One of myself and someone in our office will get to this as soon as possible and give you a second opinion around the appraised value for this property. So we try and hold your hand all the way through. We've got integrated chat support on every page. You can click on this button down here in the bottom of the page and get on the line with us straight away. We have a 1300 number here at the top of the page, or support email. We try to stand next to you and support you to make your next investment decision using our Insights platform and the support of myself and my staff. So that's a bit of a deep dive into Frankston. There is another middle market Melbourne suburb. So a few of you have actually already asked questions about, is the suburb inner Melbourne or not? There is another suburb inner Melbourne. It's within 10Ks, less than that in the northern district of Melbourne from the CBD. Prices around $550 from memory. A great growth suburb of interest in that inner Melbourne area that is featured in the report. So do look out for that as a new addition in March. So I'll just switch over screens again. Bear with me one moment. So I'll be opening the floor up in a moment for some Q&A. We've got through a lot of content tonight. I hope you found it informative. As I mentioned, I do thank you so much for joining us tonight. There will be Q&A. I'll be working with individual questions and sticking around as long as it takes to get to them all. There's already quite a few here in the chat log. Jump onto the right-hand side of the screen at any time now to start bringing those questions through. Just reiterating once again, the special offer for tonight, joining our community as an annual member. This is available until 11 o'clock only, a $200 discount, bringing our annual subscription down to $597. In addition to that, you get really perhaps the most compelling part of the offer, one-on-one direct coaching with me via Skype. We work together using the platform and research and what I'm seeing in the market to do, and all the way through to finding the individual property and then potentially negotiating on that property. You'll receive the free Pinpoint Predictions March edition of the report valued at $97, and as mentioned, the club access. We've got another event coming up 3 weeks away, which is going to be private, only to private club members, which we'll extend the invitation to, which is going to be a very deep dive into a key growth market as dissected in the March edition of the report. And our researchers are on the ground there doing that deep dive now in preparation for that event. This offer does expire at 11 p.m. tonight. And you can lock it in by going to www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus or clicking on the Join Us button over on the right-hand side. That will take you through that bonus page at any time. As mentioned, our payment is very secure and processed via Stripe at Ripehouse. All of your credit information is not stored by us. It's securely transmitted directly to Stripe, and they confirm the transaction, and then that comes back to you. They don't store or hold your details, and we don't have any visibility of that. As mentioned, at any time, we've got live chat, phone, or email support. And the bonus offer is there at www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus. So I'm going to open the floor. I'll pop it on mute for a few minutes. Have a bit of a breather and a drink of water. I won't be too long. I'll open the floor up for any questions that you might have. But if you're not going to stick around, thank you so much for joining us. I really hope you've found tonight informative, and I really appreciate your time. I'll be back in a few moments. Okay, thanks for sticking around. We've got quite a few questions to get through. Any general questions, etc., or sorry, very specific questions to you, I might take them offline, just bearing in mind the time this evening. But I'll try and get through them all now. First one is Jarlath. How are you? You're just asking, will we be sharing the Melbourne inner suburbs to look at? It was a question earlier on tonight. So we did disclose and discuss Frankston, which is in Melbourne as detailed in the March report. And I did mention that there is an inner city suburb in that report as covered in detail within it. So check out the report for more information on that. If you would like to reach out via chat, I'm happy to talk to you around that suburb personally. Maggie's asked, if we're looking for yield and growth, how would one do this? You mentioned if we go for yield, we may be missing out on better growth properties. How do we integrate both yield and growth? Look, when we're looking across the country, and generally, most of the suburbs that are nominated as big greens or boomerangs are above average in terms of yield, and especially when you're finding areas that are having very strong population pressures. Moreton Bay, as an example, which is a LGA we covered a couple of weeks ago in the webinar, has a lot of population growth. 375,000 people live there at the moment, estimated to be 500,000 people by 2035. So a lot of people are moving into the area now. That's pushing up rents per week. Prices haven't started to move yet, even though it's in the early stages of the growth cycle. Therefore, yields are generally higher. So if we're searching out these growth markets at that particular point in the phase, we're buying into those suburbs and LGAs when yields are at a high point in the cycle for that LGA, and that's how we can team them both together. So what I mean by that is, LGA in Wallara, when there hasn't been any price growth for, even though Wallara is typically very low yielding, very high purchase price, blue chip Sydney, when there hasn't been any price growth in the downtrend in Sydney, yields gradually increased. Rents were increasing per week over that time of 6 or 8 years. Yields got to a high point in the cycle, which may have been 4%, say in 2012. Then yields, rent hasn't really changed since 2012, or may have gone up marginally, but you've had huge price growth in that market, and therefore your yields have reduced and might be now sitting at 2 or 2.5%. So it's looking at where yields are in that cycle, matching that to the growth upside of the market, and then you can potentially have that growth market. And because of the point in the cycle that you're buying at, you're at a high point in yields as well. So when we're typically looking at a lot of these areas, yields are pretty good and high generally. And then you can also take a street level analysis, Maggie, and find the individual streets that are really going to amplify those yields and give you the results. I suppose at any point there are big greens using the software at different price points. So there are big greens in regional centres with 250k median that are always going to have higher yields than the big greens, as an example, in a Melbourne that's on the list at the moment. So it's also looking at half a dozen or going through the list of big greens which have great capital growth potential, and then finding the higher yielding ones from that. But they'll generally all be at the high point in the cycle for their individual yields. Okay, Suze has said she recently joined and missed, how do you access the Ripe House Club? I missed the webinar last week due to work. I'd love to see it if I can. So Suze, I'll reach back out to you with the recording link, which I might have, sorry, I think I only sent the recording link to those people who did attend as a private club event. I'm trying to keep distribution of the video, etc., just to those guys because the information is really valuable, and it potentially loses a bit of value if it's spread out widely. So reach out to me and I'll get that right through to you there, Suze. Maggie, will the tweet questions be answered in our email, Maggie? So when it comes through to our Twitter account, Maggie, it is contained on Twitter, and the response comes back to you on Twitter as well in the 140 words on there. So jump on Twitter, it's free to join. Look for us at Ripe House and add us, and then you'll be able to access us directly. You can actually click on the Ask Ripe House button, and that will prompt you to register there and have the Ask Ripe House tweet pre-filled. Excuse my pronunciation there. Using Ripe House, is there any way to find suburbs that have units as the most common property type for a particular median price? Yeah, so what we recommend is not trying to force your strategy onto any suburb. If you are looking for units and you are very strongly biased or looking towards units for your next investment, it's worth looking along for a suburb that is potentially in the growth phase of the cycle, a big green or a boomerang or an undercover that has units as most in demand of the property type. Just as a bit of an asterisk against that, we've got a lot of big greens and boomerangs in the city of Brisbane at the moment, where units are most in demand, and you'll be definitely looking at buying units in those suburbs, but you have some supply side issues as well in those growth markets. So when high density, where units are in demand and there's lots of them and it's very high density living, you can have supply side issues at any time with new apartment blocks, etc. going up. So just as a bit of a point there. Wouldn't tenants, so Lisa's just asking, wouldn't tenants prefer to live in owner-occupied areas which will be better maintained? Yes, yeah, generally I would absolutely agree with that. The problem that we find with that is getting the mix right. So if we are looking at an owner-occupier level, say a 90% owner-occupier, 1 in 10 people are investors in the area, it's typically an owner-occupier preferred area. It might be more established area of that suburb. A lot of the new residents or the rental demand or the population growth is coming to the say another part of the suburb that might be closer to the new train line, the new business park, etc. That's where the tenant demand is high. That's where the high rents, high yields are there. That's potentially where you're going to get above average rents, and you're going to be able to increase your rents going forward. You don't really want to potentially be investing in an area that has no tenants wanting to live in that street area, and then you have the potential to have higher vacancies and lower rental growth. Looking for those streets that have great ability to increase your rents and have low vacancies, while still having that middle market of owner-occupiers. It's great to have. We like to look at 30% as a minimum owner-occupiers and no more than 70% tenants in a street, just to make sure we're focusing on that meat. We've got enough owner-occupiers to ensure that the street level is maintained or even improved, but lots of tenant demand pushing up rents, yields, and potentially price on the back of that. Vincent's just asking, so the members have full access to the database for a year? Absolutely, with the annual subscription, full access as of today to all of the platform that you see in front of you today. Plus, obviously, as I mentioned, the one-on-one sessions, the March report, which we can refer back to, and then the Property Club access, which is regular private events for us. That's got through all the questions, so great mixture there this evening. Just before I sign off, I'll leave the line open in case there's any last little questions coming through. Thank you for sticking around. There's been a great number of you that have persisted through the technical issues earlier on. Thank you for being there with me and holding on through that. I really hope you have found tonight informative. And if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to contact me there at jacob.field@ripehouse.com.au, or you can log that bonus in www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus. So once again, look out for the recording, and thank you for attending.